let's read a poem together. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love, remembered, such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. You may be familiar with this poem. It's by Shakespeare. It's Sonnet 29. And it's one of these sonnets that I think really sticks with one when one pays attention to it. It keeps coming up in my daily life over the last 2 weeks, and I keep thinking about it, and I thought, well, I should share it with my YouTube audience. What's going on in this poem? A lot. First of all, it's a sonnet, so it's 14 lines long. It has an A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F rhyme scheme. Oh, E, F, and then G, G at the end. So eyes, state, cries, fate, hope, possessed, scope, least, despising state, arising gate, and then brings and kings. End it with a couplet. Now, the Shakespearean sonnet is a debated form in how it's structured. It's kind of 3 sets of 4 and then a set of 2 at the end, and yet there's strong debate about whether there's kind of an 8 and 6 structure as well. The Italian sonnet form is an 8 and 6 structure. It's usually an ABBA, CDE, CDE rhyme scheme. So you move from the A and B rhymes in the first 8 lines to the CDE rhymes in the last 6 lines. But the Shakespearean sonnet kind of has 4 sections. And yet, if we look at this sonnet, we see a pretty clear movement from line 8 to line 9 in thought. Let's look at it in more detail. So the first 8 lines are this: when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. So that's the first 8 lines. We have this kind of like, hey, I'm thinking about all these things that are really bumming me out. I am disgraced with fortune and men's eyes. I'm weeping. I feel like an outcast. I'm even calling to heaven. I trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries. It's not troubling heaven with my cries. Maybe they'll hear it. No, heaven is deaf, and my cries are bootless. And look upon myself and curse my fate. Like, woe is me. But then I look at other people, and that doesn't make me happy either. Wishing me like to one more rich in hope. Oh, I wish I was a more hopeful person. Featured like him. I wish I looked like this other guy. Like him with friends possessed. You know, he's got a social circle that I don't have. After all, I'm outcast. I'm alone. Desiring this man's art and that man's scope. So it's not just I want to look like him and have his friends. It's, you know, the talents and the abilities of others. I don't have any of that. With what I most enjoy contented least. I think that this is really getting into sort of some of the psychological difficulty that Shakespeare wants us to see. Look, even the things we like don't content us. This is a person in a pretty bad state. These first 8 lines give us a portrait of this deeply unsatisfied person. But then in the 9th line, yet in these thoughts myself almost despairing, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. So we have this turn, this yet. And you can even see in the punctuation that you have commas at the end of the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh lines, but at the end of the eighth line, we have a semicolon indicating, hey, we're done with this whole long clause, basically. We have basically a run-on sentence with all these dependent clauses, featured like him with friends possess, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy content, at least. These are all sort of defining this despairing man, and yet it's clarified in the ninth line. It's an almost despairing man. He's almost there, and then he thinks on thee. And so we have the emergence of the beloved. The beloved is never far in Shakespeare's sonnets, and often the sonnets that are most psychologically acute to the sort of negative emotions and negative attitudes are always countered with a memory of the beloved. And so we have this, I mean, he's kind of showing off a bit, especially in this, like to the lark at break of day arising. It's its own line. It's actually in parentheses. It's like Shakespeare's like, oh, you want a metaphor? I haven't really given you any metaphors yet. It technically is a simile because it starts with like. But I am like a lark at the break of day arising. This is kind of Shakespeare just dropping this image that he's like, yeah, maybe you'll get a few book titles out of that over a few centuries. Lark at break of day arising. It's wonderful. From sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. We had this earlier, deaf heaven with my bootless cries. This isn't just a like, it's like heaven doesn't listen to me. I think he takes seriously, like, look, we could be in a state where it seems like the divine is deaf to us. And yet the remembrance of the beloved all of a sudden gives us access to heaven. Sings hymns at heaven's gate. Instead of being angry that heaven won't listen to you, you are praising heaven. The ear of heaven is hearing you, and your whole attitude toward heaven has changed. And then we have this last couplet. For thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. All of a sudden, there's this deep contentment, right? It's not that I just don't want to be, this other person who's a little more talented or who has, a bigger friend group than me. I don't even want to be king. I have no envy anymore because I think on you. This is the power of a sonnet. This is the power of Shakespeare to bring us from really resonating with the maybe even divine discontent that human experience sometimes involves, and having us think on love and think on the one we care about most, and change our whole attitude, not just toward our own social situation, but toward our ultimate political and eternal state. Shakespeare's sonnets are a wealth of exploration that's very honest about the difficulties of human life and the joys of human life. I hope you get a sense for that. I love this sonnet. Thanks for hanging out with us and exploring it a little bit this week.